all preventable, and nutrition is right at the heart.
They're rising like that, aren't they?
My son has just completed a medical degree at Cambridge University. He got a first, and
well done.
Congratulations.
he did 1 day of nutrition, and that is the sum total of
What, in 3 years? Or it's longer than that for medical.
Well, it's 3 years. He's now doing clinicals at UCL, but in the 3 years, he's done 1 day of nutrition, and you know,
I hope it was a good day.
It was apparently the only day when an extraordinarily boring lecturer was found, and people actually fell asleep in the lectures. It is unusual because Cambridge academic standards are normally very high, but they for some reason did have a particularly boring lecturer that day.
To qualify,
Well, I'm sure it can't be deliberate. I'm sure that is pure coincidence.
Of course.
right. But to qualify that, it's amazing how life has become so complex, particularly when science gets involved. Because, for example, I'd like to give a short story about my great-grandmother, who was alive up to when I was 5. She died at 113 from old age, not from sickness.
Your great-grandmother died at 113?
113.
That's pretty impressive. And she'd been breastfeeding you, hadn't she?
Not that far, is another one.
Oh, yeah,
now,
okay.
when you consider she had perfect eyesight, a fantastic memory, all her teeth in her mouth, perfectly clean, healthy, never used a toothbrush or toothpaste. In fact, they brushed the teeth with this twig, a plant called the double hibiscus, which has now become the Western super drink.
Is it like ordinary hibiscus?
Is it different? It's a Caribbean hibiscus.
I've got some of those in my garden.
Right? Caribbean hibiscus. Okay. But in her day, sickness was rare. It was normal for people to be well. Words like healthy eating, organic, wasn't even created because everything was natural. Now, nowadays, children are not taught anything to do with food. People have lost the knack with cooking, as well as to make simple remedies as hot toddies and so forth is all forgotten. If you ask a child where the egg come from, the supermarket, and so forth. So, whereas in their day, they lived a purely natural life, sickness was completely rare. But I've calculated that within a generation of, like you said, the white men in white coats started coming into the island, giving us immunization, vaccinations. And because, like priests, we looked up to them, trusted them, put them on a pedestal, and believed the fact that, yes, they're making us healthier, although we weren't unwell. And what we had found is that after my great-grandmother died, literally our generation decreased by over 40 years, and everyone died from chronic sickness. Both my parents died from cancer in this country, and heart disease and different things like that. But before, all those conditions were extremely rare.
You see, I have a bit of a problem with this because you hear this from you, and I don't doubt for a moment that this is the case, and yet there are statistics that show that average life expectancy is rising. Nationally or internationally, life expectancies seem to be rising. Now, I know those figures are affected by infant mortality and things like that.
But it depends what life expectancy and where you're measuring it from. It was normal
to measure it from birth.
It's not also.
If I can just come in here, one of the interesting things about life expectancy is there has, on average, over the last 20 years, in most countries, been an increase in average life expectancy. If you remove the effect of infant mortality, so you look only at adult life expectancy, in many countries it looks, because of the increase in the cancer rate in particular, because you'll recognize that in most Western countries, heart disease has for some time been the biggest killer, with cancer being the number 2 killer. What's starting to happen is the cancer rate is continuing to increase, and that is having an effect on adult mortality. It's to some degree masked by the infant mortality rates, because we're very, very good at keeping babies alive these days. Now,
and presumably babies don't often get born with cancers and those other
That's right, although the rate
diseases.
of childhood cancers is increasing, as is the rate of childhood cardiovascular conditions. Now, the real statistic to look at, if you look at the model that we face in healthcare, is what is the change in the age of disability. So, you could argue, if you are a drug company and your business is really about selling the maximum number of pills to the maximum number of people, why on earth would you want people to die prematurely? You actually want to extend the lifespan. What you're really interested in is what we call morbidity, sickness. And so if you look at this issue of the age of disability, that is the dramatic change. What's happening is that people are becoming disabled, they're taking more and more days off work at a younger and younger and younger age. And that's because the chronic disease problem has become such an epidemic. And one of the interesting things that has been flagged by the World Health Organization is that while this was seen to be a particular symptom of Western cultures, it is now spread all over the world, primarily because the Western culture has been imposed on the cultures. And, you know, in Dawn's case, if we look at the Caribbean cultures, if we look in India at the Ayurvedic culture, or China, or the Himalayas, or the Amazonian cultures, this is the problem we see with the globalization agenda. We have mechanisms now where the entire food supply is being controlled by a handful of governments, by the World Trade Organization, by the guidelines and standards in the Codex Alimentarius Commission. We're looking at a situation where the healthcare of the planet is being controlled by a handful of corporations working very closely with governments. And, you know, as we move to this remarkable situation with this new swine flu pandemic, and we see just how governments are planning to apply a vaccine to as many people as possible, even when, in fact, many people could already be expressing the antibodies because so many people have been infected with this particular virus that, on the whole, is not that dangerous. So the concept of vaccinating people with... there's only one trial that has been published so far, and it's been published in a very prestigious journal, the New England Journal of Medicine. What it shows is that 46% of the kids in the one trial that have been subjected to the vaccine have suffered systemic effects. And these systemic effects include things such as severe headache. And of course they are a classic effect of the inflammatory response. And of course it's the inflammatory response of the immune system that can also kill you. And the problem we have with vaccination, we see it now, the UK is in crisis. We will be issuing tomorrow a call for a scientific inquiry on the HPV vaccine. This
is the human papillomavirus for young girls, 12-year-olds.
Exactly. And if you go to the National Health Service website at the moment, you'll see...
Robert, I'm sorry to break in there. We're going to go for a break now. If you'd like to text in your questions or comments for Dawn Alexander, MBE, and Dr. Robert Verkerk, please do so now to 87778 with the word EDGE and then your text. See you back here very soon.